It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm going to talk a little bit about AROSE, and then we'll, as Renu said, we'll talk about some projects. So it's a really exciting sector, and I've actually been in this role only 6 months, and I've come back from overseas. I spent 27 years, I was born and bred, went to Curtin University, left, and after 27 years came back to Perth and like, what am I going to do? And as I was talking to one of the recruiters, I said, okay, you know, what kind of job? I said, look, I want it to be a big idea. And then she came up with AROSE, and I said, well, you can't get more big than that. So yes, I am very interested. So I've been telling the story about AROSE at many different functions. So who here doesn't know, and I'm sorry to single you out, but I just don't want to go through the whole story if you've heard it many, many, many times. Who here doesn't know about AROSE? Oh, okay, all right. So I'll give you the very short version. It was founded by a former astronaut, Pamela Malroy, who's had about 40 days in space. She was the second female on the International Space Station. And she has just been nominated as the Deputy Administrator for NASA. So she's gone on to much bigger things. And then the second person was Russ Podopinski from Woodside, and he was the head of robotics. And when Russ tells the story, he goes, you know, Leanne, when you're telling this story, make sure the most important detail is that this company was founded over a long lunch at Indiana Tea Rooms over Lewin Art Series Chardonnay. So he's very specific about those details. No worries, Russ. So that's how it was founded, and you know, they're really talking about wouldn't it be great to have you know, the space tech transfer. If you look at Western Australia or Australia, it's one of the harshest environments. You've got the tyranny of distance. You've got, you know, different weather. How do you maintain things? How do you service things, etc. And Pam just levels it. She goes, yeah, space is exactly the same, right? You just can't send up an astronaut to help you out when something goes wrong. So they had this idea about space tech transfer, and if anyone's ever met Pam and Russ, they have big personalities, really enthusiastic. So then along the way, they brought on our founding members, which here tonight, Curtin University, UWA, Nova, Jason's here, Fugro, and I'm missing, I always do this, I apologise. And then we are sponsored by Jitsi. So James is here as well, so thank you for that. And that's how we got started. And so, you know, that was a year ago, and we had our first birthday. I joined in January this year. We had our first birthday in February. And so, you know, we're sort of a few months in now. We've added a few more partners along the way. Fleet Technologies, I'm not too sure if people have heard of them, but Fleet Technologies in Adelaide, University of New South Wales, Queensland University of Technology, and we have a few more that we're going to be announcing in the coming days, one from health, another one from the space industry, and another one from data and data consultancy and a HPC. So stay tuned in the next week or so. We'll be announcing 3 more partners. So we've added some partners along the way. The other thing, you know, part of the vision is that we want Australia to be the recognised leader of remote operations science, technology and services. So it really is across, you know, the industry and government and organisations, you know, bringing that together. And so, and in doing that, part of that is to work on projects, and from those projects you have the knowledge transfer from, you know, Earth to Earth or Earth to space, and then space back down again. And the idea is, you know, what you learn in space, that you optimise that for space, because, you know, when you manufacture or design for space, it is really one of the harshest environments of all. You've got to make things smaller and lighter. Because sending, you know, kilograms and kilograms to space is a very expensive exercise. So if you're developing for space, then what are the benefits and the spin-offs that we can optimise here in Perth, not in Perth, but in Perth, but also, back on Earth. So when we look at the space project, so we've had a couple of ones that we're working on. So the first one was Break the Ice Challenge with NASA. It's a challenge that's run by NASA, and we were invited by an American company who said, Australia's really good at moving dirt. So do you think you can come and help us work on this project? And so we've submitted that, and essentially what it is moving the regolith, so on the moon, and then from that they want to extract the water, and the water will be used for sustaining human missions on the moon and beyond. So that's the first one. The second one is we've just been awarded so I don't know if people are aware that Australia is supporting the Artemis mission, Moon to Mars. So we've just been awarded a demonstrator feasibility grant from the Australian Space Agency, and that is about having a lunar rover on the moon to provide, looking at regolith characterisation or flattening the Earth so that, when eventually there are landings or years to come build habitat, as everyone knows, if you build a house, you've got to understand what you're building it on, right? So it's no different on the moon. So there's some of the space projects that the consortium is involved in. And then on the terrestrial side, we are working with engaging with some mining companies, with health, with some agriculture at the moment, and looking at how do we improve remote operations for their organisation so that they can improve the productivity, the safety, and obviously the sustainability. So that's a bit about AROSE. And we see, so AROSE is, has been doing a lot of education as well. We're at RTS, so we can see that the momentum for the need to invest in space is increasing. But right around Australia, New South Wales government just invested 1.4 million in their state. Queensland has a strategy. Melbourne has a space strategy. So we're seeing a lot more interest in space. And, it's really interesting that there are a lot of things that we use in our daily lives today that were a result of investment in space. So the phone, the camera in your smartphone is one of them, the wireless headsets, CAT scans, and, something way off the technology side, baby food formula, because it's dry food, right? So it has all the nutrients. So, space really does have an impact on our lives in a positive way. So it is really important that Australia does invest, because it's about being disruptive. And if we don't do it, then we will be disrupted. So with that, and the last update, so they're the update on some projects, and then the last update is we're building up our team. And so we have just literally announced today, where is Michelle? Michelle Keegan. She is joining us next week. And so I'll just ask Michelle to come up and do a quick introduction of yourself. Thank you.
Thanks everyone for being here as well. And I think that the more I hear Leanne talk, the more I get excited about just exactly what AROSE is here for. And I think, one of the reasons I really wanted to join was that, I really do want to make sure I find my purpose. My purpose is to kind of help create some of the connection that, AROSE is about what the industry is about, just trying to improve what we do and continue to improve what we do. So I come from a strong mining background, mining and strategy, spent the last 2.5 years at South 32 creating their technology and innovation roadmap for our greenfields projects and brownfields operations. Been spending a lot of time also on electrification. I guess this is really the chance now to be able to expand what I've done there, to work with Leanne and the team and the rest of the members who all have really hefty ambitions to take what we do well here to space and vice versa. There's a lot of opportunity to learn across the industry, and I think if we're going to really do well in the industry, it is because we open our minds to be able to learn more, to be able to connect more, and to be able to do it at the right pace as well. So really excited. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. We look forward to you starting next week. And so today, we wanted to also highlight some of the great activity that's happening at Curtin University and UWA. So we have here Stuart and Fergus, who are going to talk about BINA, and they've got some exciting news about that, which I'll let them unveil. And then we've got Sascha from UWA, who'll be talking about optical comms. And I must sort of call out that Sascha, at the Australian Space Industry Awards, Sascha received the award for the Academic of the Year. So that's pretty impressive. Out of the whole of Australia, he was the Academic of the Year. And then on top of that, he received another award, which was the Overall Excellence Award, and that was the individual, category across the individual across all of the award categories. So super well done, Sascha. The state's very proud of you. Yeah. So with that, I'll hand it to Stuart and Fergus.
Thanks, Leanne. Yeah. Unfortunately, we're a bit too early in our careers to have any strong accolades like that, but I'm sure it's a few years away yet. So, good evening, everybody. My name is Stuart Buchan, and I'm here with Fergus Downey, and we're both PhD candidates at the BINA Space Program at Curtin University. And we're here today to talk to you a little bit about our upcoming launch, which is at the end of next month, and also talk about what the intentions for the program are as we continue. So just a brief rundown of what the BINA Space Program actually is. It started in the beginning of 2009, very small team, and the original plan was actually to kind of follow what the standard of the industry was, and that was to essentially buy a bunch of commercial off-the-shelf components and combine that into a spacecraft. But when we looked at doing this, we saw that there was kind of three main problems. The first one was it was going to be very expensive to do this. I'm not sure if you've had the unfortunate experience, but if you try and buy something that has the space keyword, the price goes up by about 2,000% for something that you would be expecting down here on the ground. So it wasn't really a feasible thing from that perspective. We saw it was going to be quite bulky as well. CubeSats are actually only 10 centimeters on each corner, so they're actually quite small. And if you have to buy multiple circuit boards to fill up that space, you're quickly going to essentially fill up everything you have, and then you have to buy extra space on top to use your payload. So when you've got something that costs literally right now about $1,000 per cubic centimeter to put into orbit, you don't really want to be kind of wasting space. Last thing we saw was it was actually going to be pretty problematic. When you have multiple commercial off-the-shelf circuit boards from different manufacturers, they don't sit around a table and guarantee they're all going to work nicely together. So unfortunately, you do see in some groups around the world some problems that arise from trying to squeeze these things together. So with all that in mind, from pretty early on in the project, we actually decided to shift our focus onto actually just making all this capability ourselves. So I'll give it to you for a second. I do have with me one of our circuit boards. So this is what you can see up on the screen here. Obviously it's a little bit small, so didn't suspect you'd all be able to see it. But what we've essentially done is squeeze everything that you actually need for a spacecraft to function onto a single 8-layer PCB. So I've highlighted some of the key areas here. You can see in green, we've got our primary and our secondary flight computers, and that's so we can obviously operate in space, but if our primary computer fails, we have something to fall back on and hopefully revive the mission. We have in purple there our onboard storage. That's where we'll be storing the photos that we take of Earth, and also our system logs, so we can downlink them when we pass over Perth at a later date. And then in the red, blue, and orange, you can see our GPS on view, which is our inertia measurement unit, and our attitude determination control system. And essentially what that all does is it helps us localize ourselves in space, and it also allows us to orient, so we can take pretty pictures of the Earth and also turn around to beam them back down. So I'll pass over to Ferg, and he's going to tell you a little bit about our upcoming launch, and then we'll go back to mentors.
So, as Stuart's just given you a rundown on what's inside, we're actually on our way to space very shortly. So, we're currently scheduled for the 19th on SPX-23. This will be WA's first ever designed and assembled spacecraft, so really exciting. I've just been told today as well that I can actually tell you that we're having a bit of a party in Yagan Square. So, if you want to come along to that, it'll be up on the big screen in Yagan Square in the evening, and it'll be really exciting, and we're all going to be there, celebrating and enjoying WA to space. Really big moment, yeah. So. On board this, as Stuart mentioned, is our bus and all our test facilities with that, but also the first thing that we're going to be doing is essentially operating that from the ground at Curtin University. So as well as building a spacecraft, you need to build the ground station down low to operate it. So we've done all that on one of the high points at Curtin University, and you can now see our antenna up there. We actually had it moving just yesterday, so that's really cool to see. So we'll basically have that for about 1 to 2 weeks, where we'll be getting some basic telemetry data just to make sure that what we've built works and we're all happy with it. Next up is Fugro and their Spark facility. They're hoping to operate it as well and get some of their work done. So they'll be looking at basically operating an actuator just digitally on board our satellite. And then we'll actually have a go at using our cameras in space as well. So we've got 2 cameras on there, one which we're hoping to use for star tracking, so it's the attitude control system, and the other one's a higher megapixel camera that we use to take some nice resolution pictures of WA. What's next? After the first launch, we've actually already booked in for launching 3 more on the same launch next year in August. So it's been 2, 3, and 4 is what we're going to call them. And these will have some honours undergrad projects and also some of our PhD projects as well. So one of these is a radiation material solution that CSIRO has developed. So we're hoping to work with them to show that the stuff that they've made will actually act as a good radiation preventer. The other one's communication systems, you can see on the bottom. So one of the things that we didn't do with BNR1 was design our own communication system. So we're going to build that from scratch ourselves and then implement that into the full bus, so it's all from us. And then lastly, the other one is more advanced attitude determination and control system. So that's pointing and determining where we are in space essentially, so that we can do more precise pointing on the ground, which is obviously interesting to fine optics and also laser communications and stuff that you're about from Sascha in the future. I'll hand you back to Stuart now to talk about the outreach stuff that we're also doing as well.
So moving forward with the program, I found that quite a lot of us that are actually involved within our space program have a very keen interest in outreach. Growing up in WA, as well as Ferg, and always wanting to work in the space industry, we were constantly told that if you want to work in space, you need to go overseas. And that kind of, I think, has probably stunted quite a lot of the development of that type of capability here in WA. We kind of want to change that perspective and show that you don't have to go overseas. BNR1 is, it's a very basic satellite in its core, but more than that, it's essentially a foundation stone that hopefully a long-lasting thing can be developed and continued at the Space Science and Technology Centre, and have that as a possible kind of thing that people can study and pursue as a career. Moreover than that, we're really passionate about kind of lowering that barrier to get into the space industry. Right now, we currently have with us about 20 undergraduates that are each working on different sections of the spacecraft, primarily on payloads, to see if they can hopefully fly those things in the coming years. But we kind of want to bring that down a little bit further as well. We really want to see high school students across WA actually flying their own payloads, and so that's what's going to be our BNR X program. So we'll essentially take what we've got here, squish it up to the top of our satellite, and then we have half of the satellite, which is just empty space. We are currently in the process of developing a prototype kind of box that we can slot into our CubeSat, and we can provide those boxes to high schools around the state and essentially say, if you can fit something in here, we'll fly it to space for you. And then that's bringing that barrier to entry down even further and kind of inspiring the next generation of Australian space leaders, realistically. But for now, that's in the coming years. We still want to get Western Australian students involved with the BNR1 launch. So what we've actually got here in this image is a kind of knock-up prototype ground station that we put together. So each of these costs about $200 to $300, and the intention is essentially to provide these kits to high schools all across the state and allow WA students to listen to a WA-made spacecraft, and hopefully that gets the gears turning for people in the younger generation to come through and really kind of take this fledgling industry to the next level. Thanks. We'll take questions now.
What was the date for that David Square?
19th of August at the moment, but delays can happen, it can move around, so stay alert for the 19th. If you want to find more information about it, you go to bnarspaceprogram.com, and we have all the information up there about where we'll be having it and stuff. So, yeah, that's true. So,
if no one objects, we could send it out through got everyone's details. We can send it through, you've already given Remy details, and we can just let you know the date. Yeah, it's going to be the event.
yeah, very excited.
The question is how long is the other one going to stay with it?
What actually will the students last year? Is it signals, recording, music?
I wish we could use it, that'd be cool. No, so we are getting deployed from the International Space Station, and the orbits that we tend to expect to be in last probably at maximum about 2 years. So I'd estimate probably anywhere between 1 and 2 years before we passively deorbit into Earth. To comply with the ACMA, which is the Australian radio kind of governing body, because we're using a amateur band for transmitting our radio frequencies, we actually have to constantly broadcast unencrypted data down to Earth. So every 30 seconds or so, we're actually sending down a beacon to Earth, and that's what the high schools will be receiving. So what we plan on actually doing is, because that data is obviously going to be numbers, ones and zeros, we can run a kind of small curriculum thing where they'll figure out how to do some basic programming to actually decode that signal. It's definitely well within the capabilities of students these days, I think. So it'll be really cool to see.
And will you be able to see the satellite?
Actually see it? Now that's a different question. Potentially is probably the best thing I can say. There is another project at Curtin University in the Space Science and Technology Centre called the Fireside project, which is interested in looking at space situational awareness. So potentially using those cameras we could see it, but unfortunately it is rather small. So with an optical telescope in your backyard, probably not.
Some suns do reflect. You can maybe see it in the right position in the sky, but sorry, never did that.
What kind of resolution can your cameras resolve from the ground? Like a car level? Or?
To be honest, I can't answer that question for you. There was another engineer on the program that chose the cameras. If you are interested, I can give you his contact details.
How many times a month will the satellite fly over Perth?
Oh, actually, so it's going to be orbiting Earth every 90 minutes. So quite a few times it'll be over Perth. I think we're expecting on our probably best pass about 6 minutes. But in terms of total number, you got something in mind?
Ground station should be able to see it about 2 or 3 times a day. So it won't be directly over Perth, but it'll be sort of over Perth approximately once a day and then twice sort of either side of it. We'll be able to talk to again beacons. We're also working with ESOP, and they're actually going to be listening for our beacons as well. So we will have another ground station in the Northern Hemisphere to listen to our telemetry and get a bit of information that way.
What's the application-specific sensor heads you're planning to put on the satellite? In the next versions. Obviously, you're talking about a camera this time and communications, but are you looking at infrared and other sensors for
So Fergus briefly touched on it, but for Banana 234, one of the primary payloads that we're going to be flying is a radiation sensor that we're developing in-house. So that's going to be used in conjunction with the different materials that we'll be exploring with CSIRO. And considering we'll be launching 3 spacecraft at the same time on the same day, we can have these radiation sensors on board multiple spacecraft to be recording real-time data on what really is the effect on reducing that radiation count. In terms of other payloads that we'll be flying, we do have an undergraduate team currently working on developing some in-house star tracking capabilities, so just an alternative way of localizing yourself in space. More specifically when you go into deeper space missions and you don't have the luxury of GPS. But we do have another payload slot, I believe, which is up in the air still, that we'll be kind of knuckling down on in the coming months.
So are you looking at applications that would apply globally, or are you looking at WA specific, like climate change, agriculture, mining?
It's very difficult to say at this point what the complete application of our spacecraft is, because realistically what we have developed is more so a spacecraft that's going to be defined by its payload. We essentially have most of our hardware being reused between missions, and so in terms of what we can actually do with this stuff, it's difficult to say with certainty.
Geographically, where's the launch site?
So the launch is actually from Cape Canaveral in Florida. The reason for that is because we wanted to go into what's known as an equatorial orbit, so going nicely sideways around Earth. If we were to launch in our kind of local neighborhood, the closest one would have been New Zealand, but they specialize in sun synchronous orbits, which our spacecraft would unfortunately be destroyed very quickly. a question for my boss.
Yeah, I think the idea is that, it's the form factor's reduced, the cost has reduced. So let's say there is a particular company and they say, look, we want our own satellite constellation, or there's a group of companies that want their own, that's now gonna be affordable. Whereas today, it's really not an option.
The main purpose at the moment is mainly for education and training. So we've learned a tremendous amount in just doing this process, going through the paperwork, building the thing, and now we can take those skills and apply it to bigger things. So I think what we've done here, although like all the skills we use and other things, the actual platform itself will probably stay educational and be used mainly for like high schools and anyone else has another application they want to use for any small payloads they want to test in space. There'll also be avenues for that to come as well. So.
Is there engagement from any government that way doing something similar, or is that
Well, we do have the communication lines open with UWA, and Tristan's in the audience here somewhere. He's a master's student that's actually working on a project with us right now on Binar. So certainly there is the interest in inter-university collaboration with this project.
Just for the light of this is there a single house thing that changed the satellite stuff? Is there one thing
I'd probably argue the hardest thing about getting the satellite in space is the paperwork to get the satellite in space. It has nothing to do with actually developing this thing. It's as engineers.
That's an Australian problem though.
Yeah, it's an Australian problem. But as engineers, our skills are not versed in navigating the bureaucratic world that is export licensing control and things like that. So I'd certainly say that was the most difficult and challenging. We are actually